Pete Nakos has a hot board out over on on3.com for potential next prospects to be the head coach in Baton Rouge. And I want to unpack this with our very own Caden Smith and kind of unpack a couple of these names. Caden, I think there is different tiers to the coaching candidates that you could get at LSU. There is that tier 1 category, which is Marcus Freeman and Lane Kiffin. Marcus Freeman is the unicorn tier. Can you get him to leave Notre Dame? Probably not. Like, that'd be a very, very difficult thing to ask of the guy. But I think if there was ever a job you're going to leave Notre Dame for, if you're Marcus Freeman, and it's not Ohio State, LSU, with the resources, with the recruiting grounds, with the roster you're walking into, quite frankly, with it being the SEC, with everything that you could do at LSU, the same thought we had around Brian Kelly when he took that job at LSU. I think you even dial that up even more when it comes to skins on the wall that Marcus Freeman has and what he's done on the recruiting trail and what he could be at LSU. He's got to be your first call. If he's not, you're doing something wrong. Thoughts on Marcus Freeman at LSU?
Yeah, I think you talk about the tiers, and we'll go through the tiers through this hot board. But I think in the back of our minds while we do these tiers, let's try to think about where we see Brian Kelly on these tiers relative to his entire career, because I think it gets interesting very fast, and it gets kind of back to the previous conversation we had about James Franklin, where it's like, okay, well, are you going to bring in a coach that has a better record, more wins than this guy? So I think that'll be interesting. But Marcus Freeman, of course. I mean, we saw what he did at Notre Dame. You could argue this might be the most logical hire of all time if they do this, because you are getting someone who you hired Brian Kelly, if you're LSU, obviously because he was successful at Notre Dame and doing that with those resources were. And then who comes after him and does even better? Who takes him immediately to a national championship? Marcus Freeman. So I think naturally that's the most ideal fit for an LSU would be Marcus Freeman, simply because he would literally have the expectation to follow the footsteps and make that program better than it was left by Brian Kelly. So that's the natural fit. Can they take him away from there? I don't know. I think Ohio State's kind of the program we have circled, because Marcus Freeman went there as the only school he would go to, because he's making Notre Dame work at such a high level and such a unique place and fitting right in, being a perfect match, squeezing the most out of those resources, getting the most out of his players, having former NFL players send their sons to play for Marcus Freeman. He's just so dialed with Notre Dame. I don't know if he's going to leave. And it's funny, we talk about the Ohio State Marcus Freeman thing. A lot of guys on this hot board, too, who also are alma maters are where they're coaching right now. So going to be very interesting to see not just at LSU, but overall how many of these schools are able to take people away from them that went to that school, care about the community.
Going back to Brian Kelly, I think it's okay to say, if you were wrong about Brian Kelly going to LSU and the success we thought there would be, to say that out loud. Like, I thought Brian Kelly was going to work just fine in Baton Rouge. Now, I didn't know that it would break the way it broke when it comes to the Cajun culture that maybe he didn't embrace so much. But you hear people say, like, oh, I knew whenever he put the family thing out there and he did the whole accent at his first ever speaking engagement at the basketball game. It's like, I knew it wasn't going to work then. It's like, no, you didn't. You didn't know that, because he was playing for an SEC championship his first year as the head coach. You didn't know that. Maybe you thought that in the back of your mind, but like, nobody was this out on Brian Kelly his first year when they played for an SEC championship. And I was definitely one of those guys. I was like, they look like they're doing just fine right now. It looks like a fit to me. I think it was the exact way I phrased it. And I think I made a hype video too, Cato, saying I think Brian Kelly's a fit and it works just fine and all those things. And then we're sitting here a few years later and it is what it is. But Brian Kelly, the on paper part of it made all the sense in the world. I think it's fine for us to acknowledge that too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people coming out of the woodwork and having a lot of hate for Brian Kelly. And it's like, there was none of this hate when they were in the SEC title game their first year. There was none of this hate in his second year when he had 10 wins. And it was very clear that their problem was the defense when they were giving up 40-plus points in those 3 losses. And then the next year he hires Blake Baker and they try to get things going. And then now when things fall apart, that's when we start going back and finding the receipts of the telltale signs that this wasn't going to work with Brian Kelly. The personality fit would have been put to the side if this team was regularly in the college football playoff, competing for national championships, competing for SEC titles. It's always what you can tolerate. So, yeah, like that we'll get through this with a lot of these guys too. Personality fit might be better, sure, but are you going to be able to get 10 wins in several seasons at LSU, have a season like you did this year with Brian Kelly, and be okay with it? Like, if you're okay with anything less than that, it's all about the on-the-field results. We care about the box scores and fan bases, however they warmth or however warm or cold they are about their head coach, regardless of what's happening on the field. If they're winning games on the field, that's all put to the wayside.
And this next part of the discussion for the LSU job, I think the best way to frame it is like there's Lane Kiffin and there's everyone else. Assuming Marcus Freeman isn't leaving South Bend, there is the Lane Kiffin desire, I think, for the folks in Baton Rouge, and then there is your Eli Drinkwitz, your Brent Keys. I'll have my own take on Kenny Dillingham here in a second, which I'm excited for. But like Lane Kiffin, if we're just purely going off of what's on paper and how good the job is and who the best candidate is, like that is the equation that makes the most sense. Is it not? Like you need someone who's going to score points, you need someone who's going to acquire talent, you need someone who's going to understand how to acquire talent in modern college football, who understands the SEC. LSU and Lane Kiffin, it's like check that box, check that box, check that box. The thing that I can't totally get down here, Cato, is the heart wants what it wants, and it seems like there is some different heartstrings that maybe aren't firmly tied but loosely tied to the idea of Florida. If he doesn't leave Ole Miss, that is. If he decides to leave Oxford, there's the whole thing with his affinity for Steve Spurrier. There's the whole thing with, I know, his time spent in Florida FAU. I believe that there's some things with either his wife or ex-wife and her ties to Florida. Like there's a lot of Florida, like, adjacent things about Lane Kiffin that, to me, I close my eyes and can see maybe a little bit more clearly him wearing that logo in the blue and orange. But LSU's the best job. So that's the tricky part about this whole thing. Does his heart want to be in Baton Rouge?
Yeah, breaking news, it'd be a slam dunk hire if Florida or LSU got their hands on Lane Kiffin.
Oh my,
obviously.
Windmill just.
He showed what he can do at Ole Miss, making that program prominent, and now he'd be kind of spoon-fed to prominent programs who just their own logo, their own branding, their own history in college football speaks for itself. And you can double down on that with a Lane Kiffin who would love the pieces, the weapons you can get in Louisiana, a school known for their pedigree at the skill positions and the quarterback position. And he's a cool coach. LSU's a cool brand. Like there's no doubt it would work, but it does seem like all the arrows are pointing to Florida or even pointing to him staying. So that's why I'm excited to jump into the rest of this board and this discussion, because I don't think we have to squint too hard to picture a universe where Marcus Freeman stays at Notre Dame and Lane Kiffin either stays at Ole Miss or goes to Florida. Then we get into the real people we could see actually landing this job a little bit more realistically by addition by subtraction. And I'm curious how you feel about the rest of the pack here.
Well, I'll just say this. If we get a Lane Kiffin and Whit Weeks media days where they are both representing LSU,
popcorn.
Oh my gosh, dude. Like that in itself would just be social media gold and hilarity and would be all those things. There's a lot of names here in the everyone else category. I've said I think Drinkwitz is going to get one of these jobs. It's just my opinion with what he's done at Missouri. I think Brent Key, if you could get him to leave Georgia Tech, would be awesome. I'm going to plant my flag here, though, Cato. Whenever you fire a head coach, typically you see an administration say, okay, how do we get the opposite of what we just had? Because what we just had didn't work. You see coaches that are on the defensive side, they hire an offensive guy. Who is the most opposite of this group of Brian Kelly? I think it's Kenny Dillingham.
Yeah.
He's offense, he's juice, he's excitement, he's charisma. I have zero doubt he would embrace the heck out of Baton Rouge if he were to eventually get that job. Now, is he leaving ASU? My feel is probably not. Yeah. Like, he seems like he's going to be buried in Tempe, Arizona under the stadium. Like, he loves that place so much. But, dude, if there was a fit and a fun fit here, Kenny Dillingham, to me, inverse Brian Kelly, the zig to that zag, I think he would be so fun there, dude. Like, he's out here asking the collective in his post-game press conferences, or people to give the collective in his post-game press conferences at ASU. You're not doing that in Baton Rouge. No. You are taking all of their funds and being massively successful based on what LSU is giving you to work with. So Kenny Dillingham, I'll plant my flag. Fun fit, fun hire, the everyone else hire for me. I'm nominating Kenny Dillingham.
Yeah, I think anyone who just wants an injection of excitement, whether it's Florida or LSU, I mean, Kenny Dillingham is the guy to call if you want a hot young head coach. Like, I'm curious, though, maybe we can find this out with Pete Nakos later in the week or next week. Like, what is LSU looking for? Because Kenny Dillingham isn't that experienced. Like, he's in his third year as a head coach. How comfortable is LSU and their fan base handing over the keys of such a souped-up car to someone whose overall head coaching record is 19-15. Like, yes, they had 3 wins first year at Arizona State, turned things around quickly in 1 year, won the Big 12, went toe-to-toe with Texas, and could have very well won that Texas playoff game in an 11-win season. But they're 5-3 right now. They're going through their struggles. Like, and you got to pry them away from Arizona State. Like, on this board, you have Brent Key, who's a Georgia Tech guy. You have a Clark Lee, who's a Vanderbilt guy. Jeff Brom went to Louisville. Kenny Dillingham went to Arizona State. Who can you lure away from their alma mater is one whole problem within itself. And then after that, how many of these guys have the resume that stacks up with a Brian Kelly? I mean, Clark Lee, JD, if you had to guess how many SEC wins Clark Lee had in his first 3 years at Vanderbilt, how many would you guess?
In his first 3 years?
Yeah, not the last 2 that have Diego Pavia under center, but the 3 years before that.
I'm going to say he had 4.
He had 2, JD.
Wow.
And I think that I get Clark Lee should get some interviews for these jobs that are coming up. And at the end of the day, I think Diego Pavia was really the biggest imprint on changing the program there. I think that this team had 9 total wins before Diego Pavia showed up, 2 in the SEC, 3 a year. So, like, to me, that would be a concern for me if I was an LSU fan and I was looking at this hot board. John Sumrall, to me, is the one I can't get out of my head. I think, hypothetically, if all of these guys, you can't get the Lanes, you can't get the Marcus Freemans, everyone wants to stay at their alma mater, they all get paid more because they had these interviews and the price just went up on them. John Sumrall's 15-6 at Tulane right now. He was 23-4 at Troy. Everywhere he's gone, he's done amazing. This would be his big break as far as going to the Power Four, and breaks don't get much bigger than going to LSU, but he's been recruiting in the state for the last 2 years. In the Sun Belt level, he immediately showed up in the league, won 2 straight conference title games, 2 11-2 and 12-2 seasons. I think he has a lot of the Brent Key traits. And when you talk about the opposite of Brian Kelly, when you look at the hot board, there are a lot of guys that are opposite of Brian Kelly in a lot of ways. But to me, the Brent Keys, the John Sumralls, those are the hard-nosed dudes, man, who get the most out of their teams. I talked to John Sumrall the first time I met him, the first time I interviewed him when I was still covering the Sun Belt. I wanted to run through a wall. Like, I got it. Like, I understood it. He's authentic. It's not going to be questioned. His love for the program, his love for his players, and even his love for the state of Louisiana, I thought was seen and put on display in week 1 when they wanted to wear different uniforms against Northwestern. Northwestern wasn't about that. They were trying to do that for Hurricane Katrina, and he said that was part of the reason why they ran up the score on that Northwestern team. So I think this is a guy that will win the press conference day 1 when he shows up at LSU, no matter what you think his experience is before this at the Power 5 level, whatever. I think he would immediately capture the hearts of LSU's fan base, and I think that he has the results on the field as well to back that up, and I think it'd be a little bit easier to maybe pry him away from a Kentucky that people kind of have him penciled in as a program he's going to. I think LSU could swoop in and infringe on that and give him an offer he couldn't refuse and really be a guy that can replicate what he's doing at Tulane within the state at the highest level possible at LSU.
Andy Staples said this on their show with him and Andy Arian on 3, and I think it's on the money. John Sumrall is going to get an SEC job. Now, is it LSU? Who knows? Is it Kentucky where he played? Who knows? Auburn, though, feels like it's going to become available. Arkansas, it's going to be available. If Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss, John Sumrall could backdoor his way in there. Like John Sumrall, to your point, Cato, going to be an SEC head coach. And a guy, I know he's at Tulane, so I don't know if LSU fans are like, do we really want to hire the guy from Tulane? A guy that knows the state, to your point. A guy who's got the edge, the energy, all those things, the authenticity that maybe you didn't have anyone, Brian Kelly, would make a lot of sense. I like the John Sumrall take there, a little dark horse action, Cato. I like that a lot, man. I'm excited to get Pete Nakos' thoughts on this here, though. We'll get him on this week, and this is hot board, so we'll unpack what he thinks is the most likely as the intel continues to flow in and he gets more of a pulse on things. But it's going to be wild, man. It's going to be wild.
Yeah, y'all know where to come for the offseason, man. In season, we're talking about ball. We're talking about ball 365 days a year. This coach carousel is going to get crazy. The portal is going to get crazy with it, and we're going to be here for it. So this is the place to be for sure.
It is spinning. Cato, great stuff as always.